Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Welcome everybody. I hope everybody's had a great day and looking forward to a great show with us this evening. We think we have one to provide to you. We hope that you'll come back often and not miss many of our shows. If you do, you can always view the video later on our YouTube channel, New Tracks Modeling. Hope you'll also tell your friends about us so that they can also join us. The more the merrier. Before I start the show, I want to go to Father Ron Walters for our evening prayer. Father.
O God, as we express our creativity in creating and miniature the world around us, may we marvel at the beauty and genius which created the world and instilled in us a portion of your great knowledge and wisdom. Give success to the work of our hands, O God. Amen.
Father Ron, thank you so much for the evening prayer. We really appreciate it and appreciate everything else you do for our show. Father Ron won't be with us next week. He's got a trip that he has to take. So we'll miss you, Father Ron, and hope you have a safe voyage. I also want to mention the 4 sick people that are members of our team that aren't with us this evening. Chris Blackmar, Paul Thompson, Kristen Kemper, and Ted Becker. And we wish them a speedy recovery and hope everything is going well for them in their life. I did get an email this week from Chris Blackmar, and Chris wanted me to pass on to you. Here's what he said. Blackstone is once again repairing first-run locomotives by replacing the first-run motors with the more recent motors. I don't know the detail, but their new tech figured out how to shim the motor cradle and make the repair. I believe it will cost around $60 per locomotive. When I called them, they only had 70 new motors left. So when those are gone, they are gone. And he wanted everybody to be aware of that if anybody does have the first run. He also said that you can tell if it's a first run locomotive because they have multicolored connector wires between the loco and the tender. So if you're interested, I hope you are one of the lucky 70 that get the new motor. Well, with that said, I'd like to turn to our new show coming up tomorrow evening, Modeling Lifestyle, with Colonel T.F. Feely. And this is a show that I hope you won't miss. You can only view it on our YouTube channel, New Tracks Modeling. You can view it live. You can ask questions through the chat. And I guarantee you, this is something to behold. You will not believe the detail. You just won't believe what you see. I promise you'll keep saying, I don't believe he did that. So we have a short video to show you, and then hope you don't miss.
Join the Modeling Lifestyle at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on October 6th, where we will feature the modeling lifestyle of Tom Feely, diorama builder extraordinaire. Tom is the builder of the famous Texas Liberty Forever Alamo diorama.
And again, it starts at 7 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow on our YouTube channel, New Tracks Modeling. That's the only way that you'll be able to view it. And I hope that you'll be able to join us. We have the build-alongs that are coming along. We try to limit the build-alongs that we talk about to just a couple that are the most recent ones that we know that we have scheduled. We have them scheduled through, I think, February of next year so far. So if there's manufacturers out there that want to have one of their models built on the show and are willing to give a discount to the New Tracks modelers that build along with the builder on the show, please let me know. My email is jimkello@newtracksmodeling.com. The ones we have coming up starting October the 26th, it's in a few weeks, is Hangman Creek's diorama. This one you get a 50% discount off of. And I'm telling you, Jess Dozier is looking forward to this. And I think you're going to be absolutely amazed at the diorama and the kit. The kit literally has everything that you need to build this diorama. The dirt, the water, you name it, it's in this kit. And that starts October the 26th. New Creations, Victoria Railroad Building, Alan Rogers. And Alan has been on the show. He's one of the team members that helps produce our shows. And he's going to build the St. Mary Star of the Sea Catholic Church that's originally in Ocean City, Maryland. This is a beautiful model, absolutely gorgeous. And Alan's going to build it on the show step by step. And I think you'll really enjoy seeing it. Most importantly, I think you'll enjoy having it on your layout. Then we have Darian's Lighting Without Wires. That's going to start November the 23rd. And this lighting system is amazing. The things that you can do with it and the way that he's planning to show you these things, I think you're really going to find interesting. So I encourage you to take a look at that because I know that you're going to learn an awful lot about different lighting techniques and how to accomplish them. Then I want to talk about the October 19th show, which is a special show because that's our My Build. That gives everybody here an opportunity to show their models, talk about them. They're also published in the next article that I write in one of the magazines that Dan and Amy Darby published. And if we have, there are sponsors for this segment, and if we could run their video, please.
Welcome to the world of scale, O&S railroading. We are your resource for all O&S scale modeling. Both our magazines are advertiser supported and free to read online, download as a PDF, or even print. All advertisers are hot linked to their website, so if you see something you like, just click. Please check out our websites for the current issues. All back issues available free for the O-Scale Resource and the S-Scale Resource magazines. And, if you are a manufacturer, distributor, or retail establishment, please contact us through our website for advertising opportunities.
And now I'd like to turn it over to Chris Corse, who's the host for the My Builds on our shows, and let him tell you a little bit about the one coming up on October the 19th. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. Caught me off guard. I'm in the middle of 12 different things. Sorry. Let's see. The My Builds, of course, the 19th of October. Send your photos to railrunner130@hotmail.com. I'll put that in the chat here. And it doesn't have to be anything special. It could be something you're working on, something you're stuck on. Maybe it's something you. Oh, there you go. You know, whatever you've got going on, maybe it's something you found at a garage sale somewhere and you're not quite sure how to fix, or maybe you don't want to fix it, you just want to show it off. But whatever you want, just drop me an email and we'll put that up on the My Build. So back to you, Jim.
And make sure you have your photo. Send Chris your photo so that he can put that up too, because we want to identify who the modelers are and make sure that everybody knows, what you look like a little bit, so that if you're seen at a train show, they can come up and maybe ask you a question or congratulate you on your building. So if you could send him a picture, that would be great. All right. Now, you heard me talk a little bit last show about the financial situation to keep New Tracks going. And I talked about how we encourage you to click on the advertisements and watch the advertisements on our videos, and that are linked to our website when you go to our website. And I hope that you do that. And I hope that you encourage your friends to join us, to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because that's significant. And to also hit the like button for the videos. That is significant because it plays in somehow, and I can't explain this to you, into the algorithm that YouTube uses to promote the videos. So a lot of likes of our videos is important in order for YouTube to promote them. Well, to continue this discussion, because Phil at home has been kind enough to put together some information for us that I think explains what we're trying to accomplish and how we want to accomplish it. So I'd like to turn it over to Phil and have him explain in a little bit more detail the financial part of our operation. Phil?
Thanks, Jim. So very briefly, this is kind of an area that we didn't ever focus on very much. Jim did some train shows back a while back, and that actually funded some of the costs of running New Tracks. Unfortunately, we've come to the point where that's not there anymore, and I think Jim just doesn't have the energy to try to put another train show together today. So what we've done is we've actually looked at what the costs are to run the show. So if you look, we have a set of costs. We have the website and the emails and the stuff that comes with the website. There's the Zoom fees for having Zoom for a year. Everybody knows about what those things are. One thing we have looked at is trying to get something like Constant Contact to manage our emails more effectively. That has a cost, and it also is very dependent on the number of emails you send out. And then we've occasionally talked about whether or not we need any equipment, software for video editing, that kind of thing. We've talked about potentially getting a camera we could send to people to do close-ups when they were doing a demonstration during a build-along. And we have occasionally talked about trying to get Jim off of an iPad and onto an actual computer. So all in all, the cost here is $30-40 a month, something like that, just the basic costs. What we've done is we've looked at the idea of using YouTube and Google tracking through the website to actually generate some revenue. So basically what they do is they generate revenue based on viewer actions. So when somebody views a video, views the ads in the video, especially clicks through on the ads, that actually generates revenue. We've done the same thing of adding some ads into the website. Kind of one nice thing about doing this stuff with Google is that Google tends to track people's interests, and because you're on a model railroad site and you have model railroad interests, you tend to get ads served that are in your interest area, which is actually kind of nice. And as Jim said, clicks and click-throughs are really important. Things like likes on the videos and time watched on the videos impacts their position in YouTube's algorithms and how they get served up. But this is kind of how we get funded. So, for example, if one of those 15-second videos that you can't skip runs at the beginning of an ad or in front of a YouTube video you want to watch, kind of just let it run for 15 seconds, and it actually helps in terms of the funding for the site and for the meetings. So the question I think that came up to all of us is we have no way of estimating what the revenue stream is going to be, what the income is going to be. As you can see at the bottom right, we started this on July 28th. Our total YouTube revenue from July 28th to October 4th was $47.53. So the perspective here is, if in fact over time that increases, hopefully we will have more money than it costs to run the show. What do we do with it if there's extra money? So what we've looked at is the idea of creating a new tracks mentoring scholarship. So take any excess income beyond the expenses. The goal would be to come up with $1,000 stipend. It'd be great if it was more. Pick a single modeler pursuing a higher education with a focus to enabling modeling as part of their career opportunities. And we have to be awarded as part of the cost of the modeler's institution of higher learning. Typically you can provide it directly to the institution to defray tuition costs or other costs. Initially, we looked at it and decided that because of understanding how to do this well in the U.S., and Canada were the right places to start. The idea is to do in a global expansion when we get into the second year. So if we assume that this first year we're focusing on the fall of 23, that would be for the fall of 24. The model selection criterion selection is a TBD. I know Greg and some other folks have participated in other scholarships. One of the things I want to do is pull a committee together and put together a set of criteria that will drive the selection. Quite frankly, we probably have about 4 to 5 months to do that. We need to start announcing it probably at the end of the first quarter in 2023. One of the things we will do is report quarterly back to the community about where this is and what's happening. So just to make sure everybody understands, this is very transparent, but we have to pay for the underlying costs to run the show and event. We're looking at some other ways of doing that. Some of the sponsorships may be interesting, but we've also added something else. And this is, I think, an interesting opportunity and option. There's an organization called Patreon. And what Patreon does is they match patrons with artists is really the way they position it. So if there's an artist, by registering on Patreon, you allow people to sponsor you by making donations to you. And it turns out Patreon takes about 5% of the donations in their basic plan, which is the one we're going to use. What this enables is two kinds of contributions, either a single amount contribution, you can come in and do a $10 single contribution, or you could do a monthly contribution. It's done with credit cards. So what happens is, I have a couple of organizations I sponsor this way. What happens is my credit card gets billed $5 every month, $10 every month for that sponsorship. What we've done is we've set up a New Tracks page on Patreon. And I think it's an interesting way, if you think, I enjoy New Tracks. If you come to the meetings here, it's basically 4 times a week. A couple of bucks a month is $24 a year. One of the things is, if we can start producing some of this other revenue, I think it'll allow us to change potentially some of the ad stuff down the road. But more importantly, every dollar we make beyond what it costs to put the show together basically will go into the scholarship fund. So I encourage all of you to kind of look at the Patreon site and decide if you can donate a couple of bucks there and help out. So anyway, with that, back to you, Jim.
Let me ask you this. How do they get to the Patreon site? How do I get?
I will put a link in the chat, and we probably will put a link in our next emails out to everyone.
Okay.
So the link will be on the chat in just a moment when I get done talking and I can focus on something else.
Does anybody have any questions for Phil or for me about this, or comments? What we're trying to do is not make this hard for anybody. We don't want to scare anybody off. No one's making money off of this. Nobody's getting paid anything for this. All of the people that do the shows, Phil, Pat, all of the people, Alan, Roger, all of them, we're all doing this, because we like to do this, and we're having fun doing this, I hope. And we've been doing this, now going on 2.5 years for these shows. So we hope that you enjoy it. We hope that they're significant for you. But we feel that we've got to get them on some kind of a break-even basis so that they can continue and not be a financial burden as well as a time burden on anybody. So that's why we're trying to do this. We hope you understand. We hope that you'll support us as you have in the past by viewing our shows. We hope we don't lose anybody because of this. But if we do, then that's just unfortunate, because we just don't have a choice. It's either I keep putting it out of my pocket, or we find a way to try to finance this. And the option that we've selected is we're going to try to find a way to finance the shows. So with that said, let's start tonight's show. First guest we have is Gary Shurgold, MMR, doing his bits and pieces. Gary, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jim. Well, let's see if it can work tonight. Share screen. I'm hoping that came up. No?
It did.
You're all good. Just slideshow mode. Exactly.
Let
You're
her
great.
fly.
Okay. Welcome everyone to Bits and Pieces. Okay, tonight what I'm going to talk about is rail. Now, when I talk about rail, this is HO scale rail, but this can be done in all scales. When I got into model railroading, the majority of my track, well, all of my track was brass. Eventually I switched over to nickel silver. So what do I do with all that brass track? Well, I've been in model railroading quite a few years, and I've saved a lot of this. And the one thing I do with it is I make rail bumpers. Now here you can see I've taken the measurements in HO scale for the width of the rail, and I make the long part of the bumper. And then I make the short front end part of the bumper. And then what I do is I put those together and I make a small jig that those will fit into. And here I've soldered them. You can also glue them with super glue. And the little pieces just below the jig there is the tops that will go on. They can be either soldered or super glued on. And this is what I end up with, these rail bumpers. I then paint them yellow. Up here in Ontario, they're mainly yellow. And you can see here, I've utilized a number of them on the end of the tracks. These are all over my layout. Another thing I do with these can be used for bumpers at the end of the roadway. This is coming into the rail yard and utilized for prevention of vehicles going any further than they're supposed to, or at least stop them. And here I've used them for a parking area on the upper level. And here I've used them, I measure out certain lengths of rail, and then you can build them up, stack them, weather them, and you end up with a nice little display for the side of your right of way. And that's bits and pieces for this week. Any questions?
Okay, how long did it take you to make one of those?
Probably about maybe 15 minutes.
I think it's a neat idea. I'd never thought about doing anything like that before. Let me ask you this: when you put them, if you use super glue to put them together, if you bump them a little bit hard, do they fall apart?
I don't know. I don't use super glue. I use solder. And I've never tried the super glue, but the super glue, I'm sure if you used a good quantity, it would hold them. As I say, I've always done it with solder. Like I've made hundreds of these, and of course I don't have 100 on my layout. I've sold them over the years. So
That's a neat idea. Thank you so much for sharing. Does anybody else have any questions?
yeah, one of the nice things, Jim, that this can be done in all scales.
Yeah, I know. That's easy.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to do. I mean, it's not
Yes, it
rocket
is.
science. Okay, thank you, Gary. Appreciate
You're very
it.
welcome.
Now we have something really different. There's a gentleman by the name of Kevin Hunter who owns Touch Title. And when he was putting together Touch Title, he told me that he was sitting around with some other people, and they were talking, and they were saying, you know, what do we do? What are we going to do? And they came up with the title, What Will They Think of Next? And I liked it. So I suggested to Kevin, and he agreed that that's what we're going to call this segment. What Will They Think of Next? And it's going to be presented by Kevin Hunter of Touch Title. Kevin, welcome.
I hate to say this, Jim, but I cannot find Kevin in the participants list. I'm not sure he's here. We may want to jump forward and try to call him and see if we can get him to jump back in.
That's fine, because I talked to him probably 35, 40 minutes ago, and I know he was planning to be here. He's got a bad cold, but I know that he wanted to be here. So I do think that we need to call him and see if we can get him on the phone, because he's really got some interesting things to talk about in this segment. So let me skip him right now and go to Bill Davis. I'm sorry, let me go to Greg Cassidy, who's building the Mohawk Models fire station. And this, I understand, Greg, finishes up your build of this fire station.
Yes, it does. This will be our last week.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Jim. Let me bring it all the way up. Okay, this is our last week, week 5 of building the Alton Fire Station from Motrac Models. And if you followed along, I'm building the S-scale version, but it's available in O, S, H, O, and N with only minor variations between them all. Tonight, we'll be finishing up the porch roof. We'll be mounting the front doors in the gingerbread trim, putting mortar on the chimney, mounting the base and building some ladders, and then doing some weathering. So the first thing I did was I built what I called the porch roof. It's actually a canopy that goes over the side door. The parts used are what you see here. There's a front trim. He actually gave us 2 of them in the S-scale kit. And this is the roof portion. I punched those out, and there's also a piece of paper in there that's the rolled roofing. First thing I did was I glued the 2 pieces of the canopy roof together, and I just used canopy glue, not because it was a canopy, but it works fine. And I just used an angle iron that I use for weights and for holding stuff together, and it gave me a perfect 90-degree angle. Then I painted the underside of the canopy roof gray, and I also painted the top of the rolled roofing with a light spray of gray with my airbrush. And this is how I usually do rolled roofing. What I'll do after I put a light coat of the gray on it, I sand the edge of it on a block of wood that I have, and that gives me a worn edge, and you'll see it once I put it together. Now, after painting the canopy roof, it has red trim all the way around the edge. So I painted the red on it. And then I took my sanding stick and just did a little bit of distressing on it, so it looked like the paint had been worn just a little bit. Now, when I went to put the piece of trim in, I found that having glued that together before I put it in meant I had to trim these corners. I suppose you could glue this together with the piece of trim in place. I just didn't think that far ahead, but trimming the corners worked, and I just used a piece of canopy, some canopy glue to glue the piece of trim in. And once that was all dry, I went ahead and put the stain on it, just like I've stained most of the other parts of this kit using a 100-line grease. Then I glued the canopy onto the side of the building, and I cut the pieces of rolled roofing and used canopy glue to glue them on, overlapping the worn edges. The next part of the kit is to glue the front doors in place. And you could go ahead and just glue the doors inside the edge here, and that would probably hold if you're going to put it on a layout. Mine's going to be a display model, and it's going to be handled a fair bit. So I wanted to put some type of glue block behind them. All I did was I trimmed out a couple pieces of wood from the fret that the doors came on. And then I measured how much I'd need to put behind the door without interfering with the windows. And I marked that. And then I put glue on the edge that was going to be attached to the wall. I then glued the two to the wall and used a clamp to hold them in place. And I also put a little glue block up here at the top where the two doors are going to meet. And once that was all done, it was just a matter of putting glue behind the edge of the doors and gluing them to the blocks in place. Now, the next piece we're going to put on is the gingerbread, and that comes as a separate laser cut piece. And I first primed it with some gray primer and then went ahead and painted it with the same red that we've used on everything else. I then did a little bit of light distressing on it, the same as I've done with most of the other pieces of painted wood. I just used my wire brush and just barely touched it with the sanding stick. Now you can just glue the piece of gingerbread right here in the V of the roof. But again, I wanted this to be extra strong. So what I did, I cut two small pieces of 1/8 inch strip wood and I glued them to the gable end of the wall. And then I just glued the gingerbread to those pieces of strip wood. And that way it's got a lot of surface area that it's attached to. And it also made sure that the relief was even on both sides. And then once it was glued in place, I went ahead and put my greige stain on it as well. And this is how it comes out looking. Once you put it on, you can barely see the pieces of strip wood that are behind it. Now, with the S-scale kit, it comes with a wooden laser cut chimney. The O-scale kit also comes like that. I know that the HO kit has a plastic tissue chimney, and I'm unsure about the N-scale kit. But what I do for the wooden chimney is I first mark the center, and then I'll drill a hole in it. And I use that so that I can put a wire in it, and I can use that wire while I'm painting it. I do similar things with the plastic chimney, or if they have a hollow middle, I have a piece of strip wood that I use. Anyway, once I painted it red, I got ready to put the mortar in. Now I actually have two chimneys because I promised you guys at the beginning of this that I was going to show you two different methods of applying mortar to a brick chimney. This could actually work on any brick, and I've used it on a number of buildings. One method is going to use lightweight spackling. And the other method is going to use a distress crayon. And they're actually somewhat similar in how they work. For the spackling, I just use a brush and a little bit of water and a flat tool I have for applying it. I'll first take some of the spackling and apply it on the chimney. Then I'll take the brush with the water on it and just move the spackling around until it's into all of the grooves. And once it's in all the grooves, I'll just let it dry there. Now with the distress crayon, the procedure is somewhat similar. What a distress crayon is water activated pigment that's in a binder that's kind of like a waxy crayon. The big advantage I see with using a distress crayon is they come in a multitude of colors. So you don't have to settle on white. You can put in gray or a sand color or whatever you like. The first thing I do is I use the distress crayon and just smear it on all sides of the brick. And then I use water, and you could use a brush. This time I use my finger, and you smear it around, basically pushing it into all of the mortar cracks. And then once you've done that, I take a cloth and wipe the excess off the top. and then I put it aside to dry. And when they're both dry, there isn't much of a difference between the two. They both work well. With the distress crayon, you can get small voids, which gives you a look of older mortar. And as I say, you have a choice of colors if you want to do that. Once I'm done with either of these, I don't put any type of clear over it, but when I've used this on buildings, sometimes I have put a dull coat over it just to help protect it. Now for my laser cut chimney, it has a cap that goes on it. This step you won't need to use with the plastic chimney. The first thing I did after punching it out was I painted it a concrete color. In this case, I used Israeli sand. And I painted the top of the chimney black and then put the cap on place. If you wanted to, you could probably drill and hollow that out, but that's a bit of work. Now, if you've ever tried to glue a chimney or something else into a roof where it was supposed to stand up straight, you know, sometimes even if you camber the edges of the hole that you have in there, it's hard to keep it from trying to stick out at a 90-degree angle. So what I've done here, in addition to chamfering the holes, I mounted the building upside down on some blocks, made sure I had it dead square, and then I used a block to hold the roof and my other block to push on the chimney. I had put glue on the opening and stuck it in to where I wanted it to go. And while this is holding it in place at a perfect plumb angle, I cut 2 little blocks of wood and went inside and glued those in place. And again, as I said, since this building is going to be handled, I wanted that chimney to be extra strong. So I let all of that dry. And then once I'm done, whenever I've put something through a roof like this, I like to use gallery glass to put simulated tar around the chimney. Now I just use a toothpick to apply it and then let it dry in place. Now, as I showed you before with the base, you're not going to see very much of it unless you have the doors open or you're doing an interior. In my case, I did want to have a little bit of weathering where the doors are, indicating maybe vehicles had gone in and out. And that's easier to do before I glue the base onto the building. So I did that using some pigments. And now it's time to glue the building onto the base. I made sure all of the tabs fit right, which they did. And I just put glue all the way around on all 4 edges of the building and then stuck it onto the base. And if any glue squeezes out anywhere, I just use one of these little micro brushes to clean it up. Now, one of the little extras that came with this kit was a set of ladders. And I did a little bit of research, and it looks like fire department ladders around the world come in many different colors. So you could paint yours red or yellow, silver. A lot of them were just left the brown wood that they come in. I decided to paint mine red and my extension ladder silver. So for the extension ladder, what I did was glued the 2 pieces together and then took some thread and used some of the liquid PSA to glue it to the upright part, bring it around, and then glue it back down to the bottom so it looks like it's tied there. There's lots of different extension ladders. And this one came out looking like a passable one. I did a little bit of weathering on the ladders. This one, I think I did a little too much. My wife says it looks like a painter's ladder. So now that the building's all done, it's time to weather it. Many of you probably have your own favorite ways of weathering. I like to use pigments. This is a number of pigments you can buy. They come in hobby shops and art supply shops. And I have soft brushes that I use with them. I'll make little piles of whatever pigment colors I'm going to be using. And then, depending on what brush I'm using is what I'm going to be doing with it. I'll use a small narrow brush to put little streaks in places. And then I'll use a big soft brush to help blend them in. And I'll also put pigments around the bottom to show where it might have collected water or become dirty. I also use pigments for places where it might be running down on the roof from the chimney, from other openings, and around all the wear areas such as doors, on the side door, and things like that. So at this point, I'm done with mine, and I'm quite happy with the way it came out. The diamond shingles really make it stand out, and I think it's a nice little firehouse. And Jeff Adams should be with us.
I'm here.
All right, great. Well, that's it for my build of the Motrac Alton Fire Station. I want to thank you for joining us. And if you followed along, I hope you enjoy yours. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. He has a word to say.
Before you do that, Greg,
Yes.
the stuff you made the tar was called Gallery.
Gallery glass, and it's called their lead, I think.
Where do you get it?
I got it at Michael's,
Oh, okay, cool.
but I think you can find it online too.
Well, I got Michael's.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
I wish I had Mike. I wish I had Michael's near mine. My nearest one is over an hour away.
Well, you live out in the boonies.
Yeah. No, Craig, you did an excellent job on that fireplace. I mean, the firehouse station. I can't wait to see it next week.
Okay, well, you'll get it.
You know, so if anybody's listening, we got the big show next week in Maryland. Come to the show.
Is that timonium?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
So you're going to be there with the court, what do you call it? Courtyard group or
Craftsman Courtyard.
Craftsman Courtyard? Yeah.
Yes, I will be there. Yes.
There's a bunch of you going to show up out here.
I will be there with the toggles.
Will you?
Great.
Yeah, you're going
I'm
to be
sorry?
there. Chris is going to be there.
Yeah.
I will be there.
Yeah. I think we got altogether it's 42 tables. I think it's 14 vendors, something like that. So
That's
it's gonna be a good
fantastic.
show. And we're having a modeling contest. So if anybody wants to come by, bring a model. Us vendors, we are the judges.
Jeff, you'll have a new firehouse you can put in that competition.
Fortunately, manufacturers are not allowed to enter in the contest. So Greg, you can.
Where is the Craftsman Court in the map?
It's in the South Hall.
Okay.
South Hall in the so once you enter, you've been there before?
Every day, every time for about 10 years.
Okay. So when you walk into the South Hall, you know right away you're gonna see F&C, Flamingo, wherever how you say their name.
Right.
Flamingo. Just take a right after the door and go straight down.
Okay.
If you remember, I was always set up right across from F&C.
Okay.
And then now I'm in the front, but for the Craftsman Courtyard, we're in the South Hall.
Okay. I will be right there behind CMR, right at the front door. They gave me a whole new booth there. So
it might be mine.
well, I'll be behind between custom model railroads and the Japanese display, which is usually right there on the first aisle. So
yes, okay.
Anyway, you can see
All
it
right,
on the
well,
map.
thank you for watching, everyone. If anybody has any more questions about the kit,
Yeah, what's the size of the model, the length and width?
And what scale?
S scale?
Um,
That's what you built it in, right, Greg?
yeah, it is. I don't have the exact measurements, Jeff. If you don't have them,
no. Hey, Craig, look on the box. You got the box?
it's downstairs.
All right, hold on.
I will say it's probably about
Hold
4
on.
inches by 8 or 9 inches.
Hold on. I got the measurements right here.
Okay.
All right. S scale. I'm on my website right now. Fire station. Oh, here it is. All right. It is 7.5 inches by 3.375. So what's that? 3/8. So
Yeah.
7.5 by 3 3/8.
Good size. That's great. Jeff, you made my night. You're the You are the first person that's come on the show that fumbled the name of another dealer. Except for me. And there's one person that was on our show for a long time. Every time he was on, everything that he did, I couldn't pronounce his last name to save my life. And I stumbled. It just got to be ridiculous. And finally, I think he just stopped coming because it wasn't any point in coming. I couldn't pronounce who he was.
Jack still loves you, Jim.
Well, there was another name for F and C, but it's not politically correct to say on the show.
Yeah.
Jeff, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. And Greg, thank you so much for being the builder.
No, I'm glad to
My
help.
pleasure.
Glad to sponsor.
Fantastic. All right, moving right along to Mr. Bill Davis. Bill wasn't here last week, so what he was going to do for you last week, he's going to do for you this week. And keep in mind, he's building this Sylvan scale models of the CN's 1929 boxcar kit. So Bill, welcome. Glad you could join us this evening.
Glad I could too. Okay, share screen. Desktop. Maybe. There we. Come on. All right, so here we are at part 4. We're going to talk about building ladders and steps and painting and all that kind of fun stuff. So on the O-scale kit, I had to assemble the ladder. They provided you with these two different step ladders edges. I had to replace some of the rivet detail with some titchy rivets because they didn't cast properly. And then I made rungs out of 0.15 wire. Now, in order to keep this all square and straight, I made this little jig. And these 2 bars slid here and here. And then I made this little jig to cut the length of the rungs. And then there was a groove cut in these to set the rungs in, which is what I did there. So the ladders were assembled pretty easily.
You solder them or glue them?
Well, I couldn't solder them because the ladder edges are resin. So no, that's all. Everything's ACC as far as that's concerned. Now, a lot of guys who have built this kit have replaced these with brass pieces, and they did solder them, but I didn't do that.
Yeah.
So this is the picture of the end, and it shows the end ladder here. And the next picture will show the end on the side ladder. You'll notice how they had 2 different styles of steps on them. So make sure you put the right ladder in the right corner, because you can reverse these if you're not careful. Also, this is pretty much every detail that needed to be put on this end of the car. So it's pretty much ready to be painted. Now for the steps, he provided a resin casting. I felt the resin casting was a little heavy, and also it wasn't the correct shape. So I bent some wire. I had some flat brass wire. It's about maybe 15 thousandths by about 60 thousandths. And I added some nut bolt washer castings to represent its mounting. I didn't use a jig for this. I just kind of drew it on a piece of paper and just bent it accordingly. I could have made a jig for it, but there's only 2 to make, and I could handle those 2 without making a jig. So for now, the HO kit the HO kit, they provided titchy ladders. And so I installed the titchy ladders on one end of the car. I almost installed them on the second end of the car, but I broke them. So I have to find some more titchy ladders at the end of the car, but I did get them installed on one end of the car. It was a little more challenging putting those on that was actually doing the O-scale ones, even though I had to assemble those. And I felt that the rungs were pretty heavy on this, but I didn't want to go into the effort of cutting it all apart and rebuilding it. They're pretty fragile. Now, they provided plastic steps for the car. Once again, I felt that the shape was wrong because the prototype pictures show them with a slanted on this side over here. So I bent some very small flat wire. This is like 0.10 by 0.24 wire. And I bent the shape and super glued it in place. So these are the cars. I primed them with, this is probably sacrilege, but I primed them with Floqual gray primer. I don't think you're allowed to use Floqual anymore, just allowed to keep it in your shelf as a trophy or something like this to be able to have it. But I actually used it for this project. I don't have trucks yet for the O-scale cars, so I have these blocks that I made up. I have a large collection of jigs, and I may do a clinic or a presentation here about building jigs, because I love making jigs for different usages on building models. So we're going to talk about weather roofing. Roofs are a real interesting part of cars. You'll notice in this picture here that these roofs are really in bad shape, but the car's not in bad shape. The sides, the ends, I mean, you got some lettering that has shown some rundown, but overall this car is in good shape, but the roof is a mess. And I've seen a lot of pictures of cars like that, especially in the steam era, but also later on, as I'll show you more later in a bit. So this picture is it's out in the 1940s. It is part of the Farm Bureau photo series. It was done by Jack Delano. It's a real interesting picture because if you look at the different roofs on these cars, there is every variety in the world up there, some with damage, like in this car here. Most of them, you'll notice there's a lot of black on them. That was probably soot from the steam locomotives. But as I said, each one of these roofs are different. Look at this roof walk here compared to this one here. Look at the way this roof is weathered compared to how this one's weathered, or this one, and so on. So there was a lot of variety in weathering on roofs. And I think on most cars, even though these cars look pretty pristine otherwise, like these stock cars, look at the roofs. They're all pretty beaten up. So roofs tend to take a beating. The sun beats down on them, soot develops up on them, rain sits on them and causes damage. There's a lot of damage to roofs on a car that aren't on the rest of the car. So now this is a Rio Grande boxcar. You'll notice how, once again, the paint in the roof has really been worn off through the various things. And I really like the weathering on this car. The rust streaks are really, really nice. Very, very well done. And I'd love to be able to do that in a model that fine. That is really, really, really nice work done by God. Now, modern era cars are a lot of times even worse as far as their roofs go than the steam era cars. Look at this Burlington Northern car. First, the car is pretty weathered all the way around. And of course, our taggers were busy. But look at that roof. It's almost totally rusted. And so if you model modern era, you still got to do some serious roof work. And this car here, which is a maintenance away car, isn't as bad as the other one, but you can see that it definitely is worse for wear. So let's talk about how we're going to do this. So after I primered this car and I got let it dry for a couple of days, I used some Floqual Old Silver and brush coated a coat of old silver on it. Of course, not doing the roof walk because that would be wood, and let that dry for a couple of days. And then I used what they call the salt technique. Now, I learned a lot from military modelers on how to do things. Those guys, in a lot of ways, are way ahead of us in a lot of their weathering ideas. One of the techniques they have is to use salt. On this project, I used just plain table salt. I had some coarse Himalayan pink salt that I used, which worked good in the O-scale car, not so well in the HO. I probably would have been better off using a finer salt on the HO car, but I'm an O-scale modeler, so I'm used to using what I used. So then I mixed together, and the color looks off in this picture here, but it's actually more brown than it looks here. I mixed polyscale, Rock Island maroon, and boxcar red, about a 50-50 mixture to get a reddish brown color that was close to what the CN had on their cars. So that's where we're at this stage here. Then I, after the cars bought a paint, I scraped off the salt with a very stiff brush, and then went back and did some washes over it so it wasn't so blatantly silver. I didn't like to have it be really that bright silver like that boxcar had on it. I thought it kind of more toned down. So that's what I did, but I wanted it to be really kind of mottled and ugly, and I think I achieved that on both cars. Then I did the roof walk, went back and did a little more touch up, a little more scraping with the coarse scraper to remove some of the color, the red color. And I painted the roof walk that I built using multiple layers of, well, first I put a coat of Tamiya wood deck tan. That didn't work real well. So then I went back to just craft paints, and I used a tan color, a brown color, and a gray color. And that's actually grayer than it looks in this picture here. But I did that with multiple layers and got the various tone qualities in the roof walk. For the HO car, I did the same thing. It's a little more obvious with the various tones in the wood on the HO car. Okay, that pretty much, does that wrap everything up? Yeah, that pretty much wraps up what we did for this one. Next time we'll finish weathering. We'll do the lettering, final assembly. Till then, any question, guys? Okay.
Looks really nice.
Thank you.
It does look nice. How's the HO one coming, Bill, for you?
The O scale's going great.
How's the HO coming for you?
It's been a challenge. It's been a challenge for me, but it's not the only HO stuff I've built, and I don't do a lot of it. As a matter of fact, right now I'm in the process of trying to build a CNS caboose in HON3 for a friend of mine.
Let me ask you why it's a challenge for you. What is difficult with the HO one for you?
It's so little. I mean, it's just like, the thing's like, it's just so little. And it's like, gee, what size drill bit do I use to drill this? What size wire do I use to make it look realistic and things? They're just very, very small. I've spent.
What you're saying is you're not used to HO. It's half the size of what you're used to building. There's nothing wrong with the kit per se.
Oh, no, not at all. No, the kit was fine.
It's you.
It's me. It's me. But I've done O scales since the 70s, and yes, I've done a lot of custom model building over the years in all scales. Never N scale though, but in HO, S, and O scale, and it's a whole different mindset. It really is. When you're working in your own personal scale, I don't know what scale Greg normally models in, but doing that S scale kit, was that different scale for you, Greg?
It was. Most of my modeling's in HO, but I build kits for other people, and I had just done 2 O scale kits in this past year.
Yeah.
And if I do more of those, I need a bigger workbench.
Exactly. And those are the issues. It's things that you would normally do and not think twice about that all of a sudden become a challenge to you because you're not used to working with that size or that scale.
Well, I do think after finishing this firehouse, S scale really is a nice compromise. And I think some of those people are onto something.
It's a very nice compromise. I started off as a kid in American Flyer, so I had a lot of S scale in my life. Anyway, I'll see you guys next week, and we'll try to get this bad baby finished.
Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Well, now Kevin Hunter has joined us. And Kevin, I'm sorry you're so sick tonight, and I won't keep you long. But I would like for you to at least tell us what will they think of next is going to be all about.
There we go. Somebody got my mic for me. Okay. Yeah, I went to a show in Berea, Ohio, and somebody coughed in my face at the end of Sunday. So I have tested. I don't have COVID, but I have a cold, and I haven't had a cold in 3 years. So it's a little rough. Anyway, so I came on. I wanted to say hi to everybody, and I'll do some hand waving and descriptions. But if you're not familiar with the touch toggle product line, it's small keyboard sized keys, little squares that are touch sensitive. And when you take them, you can just tape them to the back of your drawing for a control panel. And it puts a little light on the paper in the middle of the touch toggle. And so you can touch the paper and touch the light, and it throws the switch, or it operates a circuit, or, it can be used for a lot of different things. And we have one with 2 lights and one with a single light that changes color. And that's the main 2. And then we have one that's got 2 lights, both of which are green, which is when you've got an infinite number of controls on one panel, the red stops making sense. So anyway, with these very simple things, you can take your drawing or your printout and turn it into a functional control panel. And then you drop it into a Michael's picture frame, just a utilitarian frame. And we usually recommend to put some quilt batting behind it, just to hold everything snug to the glass. And then you just put the back on and mount it for a control panel. So the whole cost of the control panel after the touch toggles is really minimal. Typically $10-15 for a pretty good sized picture frame. And the wonderful part is, if you don't like it, you can tear it apart in about 20 minutes and completely rebuild it with a different drawing. So if you left something out, you just tear it apart and put it back together again. It's very quick. Anyway, and I will do some demos of this in the future, but as I said, I right now I've got a headache about that big. So we have over the last year, I've created about a dozen add-ins, and Jerry Cornwell has one that runs a Y, and he just can't say enough about it. You pick the side of the triangle that you want to travel through, and it turns green, and everything else the other 2 turn red. And so it's a very simple route control, but you don't have to think about which way any one switch is thrown. And so, and so we have that. We have one for a 3-way switch that prevents the points from clashing, takes care of you. We have a new one where it's hard to describe, but where 2 main lines branch into 3 main lines, kind of the internal passing track that, I know the UP uses it, and there's a lot of trains that may use that. Anyway, just a bunch of stuff that makes the controls feel more natural and makes it so you don't have to think about too much when you're operating things. And the latest, and I think the greatest one we have right now, is a matrix controller. The matrix controller has 8 touch toggles max that can connect to it, and up to 8 turnouts. And if you need more than that, you just plug in another controller. So it's all electronic, it's all plug and play. And to set up your matrix for the operation you want, there's a little flash card that comes with it, and you put and there's a text file on that flash card with like 100 characters in it, and you edit that text file to tell it red, green, for each root. You tell it how you want the root to be thrown, and it's very, very flexible, and it can be set up very quickly and modified if you get it wrong by just editing this file. And the unit comes with a little USB adapter, so you can just stick this in your keyboard slot and open up the text file and edit it. So it took years for me to come up to be able to decide to actually use a computer. Pardon me. So I didn't want to have a computer involved, but considering it's just editing, left, right, and so forth, I will bring that on and do a demo probably at the next meeting. Pardon me. What else? We of course have switch controllers for just about any kind of turnout. So I think the one that we've got trouble with right now is Lionel. But that is because Lionel has decided to use the noisiest control system. They're, what is it? TMCC is what they call it. And it just fills the air with noise. And the noise just happens to interfere with the touch toggle. So we have a new toggle device coming out that won't be affected by that. So it took 3 years to build the base that for Lionel's, because they have some special requirements. And when we got it all done, we found out that if you actually set it up on a Lionel layout with this remote control for sound and animation, all the toggles go crazy. They just start flipping back and forth. So, but anyway, for all of us real modelers, pardon me, the toggles all work just fine. They really are pretty much bulletproof. And the design that I released 12 years ago is still exactly what the current model is. I think it's got the number 26 down in the middle of the board because that's the version number after doing all the research on it. Anyway, so it's a very high dependability system. We were known as Barrett Hill Trains for the longest time. That was the original name. But the touch toggles have kind of taken over most of our business. So I just created Touch Toggle Inc. and touchtoggle.com will get you there. I'd recommend anybody that's interested to just go take a look. It's almost too much documentation on the website. So, and if, I'm cranking out new parts and troubleshooting things. So the website has been kind of neglected a bit, but it's if you take a few minutes to parse out what's going on, it's really not that bad. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to have to do a presentation of some of these little widgets that we have, and I think it'll be a lot more sensible when I do that. But I'm actually bundled up under a whole pile of sheets and blankets right now just to keep me warm.
Why don't you go rest and come back next week, and hopefully you'll feel better, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Go relax some.
Well, I was about to cancel out and I crawled under and got nice and warm. I said, I can do this. So, so anyway.
I hope you feel better. Really do.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Now the guy with me at the show came home with COVID. So
well, you're lucky you didn't.
Kevin, take another test. The first test is always negative.
Oh,
take another test. Yeah, I took a test on Saturday when I started feeling sick. It was negative. Sunday when I felt worse, it was positive.
Well, I will. And it was very solidly negative, but and I can still taste things and so forth. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't ring with COVID, but oh yeah, I'm going to be just taking it real easy. And if it is just a cold or a light flu or whatever it is, I actually have a flu shot and I have like umpteen COVID shots. So I've gotten the latest boosters, but which may be why I'm not actually showing or presenting, with that. So anyway,
Go,
thank you so much
go
for-
relax. Have a good night's sleep. We'll see you
Yeah,
next week.
yeah. And yeah, I really, this sounds like it'll be a lot of fun. So I'm glad to see you guys, and some of you I know pretty well, and some less so, but cool. All righty. Well, I'm going to check out now. So
See you, Kevin. Thank you so much.
yeah.
Get
and
well before next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, I should, unless it turns into full blown COVID, I'll be just fine. But, and even then,
Take it easy. Go to bed, relax, and take it easy.
yeah, it's like, oh, look, misery. All righty. Well, good to see everybody, and I'll talk to you later.
See you next week. Well, now I'd like to turn to our featured modeler tonight, Seth Newman. Seth's the owner of MRCS, and we're going to talk about his model railroad and his modeling. So Seth, thank you so much for coming this evening. I really do appreciate it and looking forward to this.
Super. Thank you. Let's see. Let me share and where'd it go? And okay, have you got that?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So I'm going to talk about my Union Pacific Oakland sub. Originally started with a part of the area called Niles Canyon, but when we were working on this article, my friend Harry Wong, who is my editor, said, referred to it as the Oakland sub because that's what Union Pacific calls it. So really made more sense, and we switched the name. So let's just generally show you where we are. This is the San Francisco Bay Area, the southern part of it. Here's San Jose, and here's Mountain View where I live. And you can see part of the attraction was that it was close. And I model about 2 scale miles of 22 miles of real railroad running from Milpitas north to an area called Niles and Fremont, and then up through Niles Canyon and to a place called Radom, which is a railroad name sometimes called East Pleasanton on the former SP. So I generally model the former Western Pacific line, which came to UP in the 1985 merger, and that was UP's access into the Bay Area for 11 years until they purchased SP. So let's see. I discovered this while I was in college here at Stanford. I had to go out to the valley one day and went through the East Bay Hills, and there was this railroad. It's fairly unique as a Western prototype in that we've got 2 railroads that are very close together for quite a while. Now, those of you from the East Coast may say 2 railroads on either side of a river, water level route. Why would there be anything else? But here it's unusual. Of course, having the Alameda Creek winding through the canyon resulted in a lot of crossings and some interesting bridges, which made for great modeling. On one side of the river, we had the former Western Pacific or UP main line, so we got some mainline action. On the other side, the former SP had gone to the county of Alameda that then turned around and leased it to the Pacific Locomotive Association as the Niles Canyon Railway. So we have an interesting tourist operation that actually is developed into a pretty nice historic railroads. So it's a good museum, railroads, interesting structures, interesting things to scratch build, should I ever get the time. Let's see here, focus. So let's talk about the design a little bit, the givens and druthers for those of you who followed John Armstrong. Constraints are the room size. We were able to build a purpose-built room onto the house, so it's not in a garage, and as a result, it's somewhat larger at 14 by 34. I did need to keep one wall clear to get to an office at the end, and I'll show you that in a diagram in a few minutes. I had limited time at the time. I was still working. We started working on this in '98, and I didn't retire until 2008. And of course, it wanted to be an operations-oriented railroad. And one of the actually benefits of not being able to get too much done early was I had an opportunity to operate on a lot more railroads and focus on what I really was interested in doing, and that's resulted in a much more satisfying railroad than it would have been otherwise. So anyway, the solution was a fairly simple to build layout, focused on a smaller number of larger scenes with larger industries. And that gave it much more of a modern feeling. I think we all love the really nice small structures, but a lot of them, frankly, are not much larger than the boxcar they receive. And that may have been okay in the era of loose car railroading, but it doesn't really feel like today's railroading. So the layout schematically comes from Milpitas over here on the right, moving north. The UP uses compass directions. Most Western rail fans will think of that as east, north being towards San Francisco, and here was this was the connection that got you to San Francisco. There is hidden trackage representing the Niles sub, and that crosses over to the visible main line at Niles Junction, and then continues down the former San Jose branch of the UP Milpitas sub. And you can continue around the back, and that loops around to be San Jose. So that gives us the ability to represent traffic going south to Los Angeles area. West Colton would be the major yard, or the other way, going out towards Livermore and the Central Valley and Roseville. And from Roseville, you go to North Platte or Klamath Falls or Portland. Let's see, once again, keep losing focus. So here's the track plan I promised you. This is the main part of the house here. There's a guest bedroom in this area. Can you all see my cursor?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay. And then there's an office here, which was essentially built to replace the bedroom that used to be here. So I use this as an office, but the practical part of this is this becomes 2 or 3 bedrooms and a bath or two at the point there's no longer railroaded here. From a design perspective, as I said, I'm an operator, and operations is really modeling the jobs of the railroad. And I wanted to model a certain number of locals, and we'll follow the 54 local in a minute. A dispatcher, because this was a TCS or CTC railroad. Originally, I wanted to do a yardmaster because I really enjoy yards, but then in my research, I discovered that Milpitas didn't have a yardmaster because it didn't have a dedicated switch job. So we changed to follow the prototype. It has a clerk, and that had huge benefits because now every job does their own switching in the yard, and it really enriched a bunch of trains that otherwise would have been very short and boring jobs. And we still have transfers, few through trains, a commuter, and if nobody else wants to run them, I, as the superintendent will take those during the session. So let's follow the 54 because it goes across the entire visible railroad. It starts at Milpitas, it works as it turns, so it only works trailing point. This was great because it didn't have a lot of room for runaround tracks in most of the towns along the way. As I say, it works its way north. It still sticks in my throat to rate them, and turns on the Y and comes back. We work from switch lists, supported by a little RFID system, which I think I talked about last time. And we don't fully implement it in the sense that all we're really doing is producing standing cut lists. But because the little database knows, you can see that here's the road number, CSXT, can't even read or road name, the number, and the car type. So we know we're looking for a CSX gone. And the clerk actually will fill out the from and to and hand this to the crew. So the clerk doesn't have an engine. He just goes and gives a switch list to the crew. And the general rule is if you're driving a yellow locomotive, when you're in the yard, you're under the direction of the clerk. So let's start from Milpitas. Here's the main yard. It supports the NUMMI plant here and is also the base for the 54 local and a little bit of interchange with a BNSF trackage rights job. And you can see it on the track schematic. And here's an aerial photo. I started working on this a few years before Google Earth, but happily I have a friend who has or had at the time a Cessna 182. So we did a few recon flights, and here's a picture of Milpitas Yard. You can see it's full of auto racks. And then here's a bunch of Silicon Valley tilt-ups and a water plant. And we actually model a fair amount of this, and there's a few in-yard industries. But generally, this yard is an industry support yard, and it swaps blocks with trains that come through. Here's a quick picture of it, an AD track, which also passes for a siding, 3 class tracks, short runaround, and several storage tracks. In the real world, this is actually an automobile mixing facility, so there's more like 20 storage tracks. We also support Waukesha Electric, the water plant, and Smurfit Stone paper box warehouse. These are not worked by the 54, so I'm just going to brush through them. But as you can see, we do have an engine track. No fueling racks or sand or anything fancy. We'll go up to Oakland when we need serious maintenance, but we can bring an oil truck in to pump some fuel into the local, and we're just done with that. The clerk has come out with his ATV and given us our switch list. The cherry picker back here is a roofing gang working on this warehouse in the background. So now the train is assembled. We're going to head north, and we're going to go around the peninsula. And the first place we're going to go to is Snowboy, although we're not actually going to work that. That's worked by the NUMMI job, and it's also worked by the trackage rights train. But it's called Snowboy because there was a packing house here. You can see they were with Sunkist, and it was very modelable. It was 9 tracks by 8 or 9 cars, and we were actually able to model 7 tracks by 4 or 5 cars. We have one long track used for off spots, and you can see we handle plastic pellets. A lot of these are used at the plant, although about 70% of the traffic at Snowboy is not related to the auto plant. We also have an acid track, a chlorine track, and a couple of general tank tracks, which generally are going to be ethanol and diesel fuel. Then we go over to NUMMI, which is the auto plant. Again, we don't go in there, but you can see it's divided into basically 4 sub-industries: body parts, auto racks being shipped, a set of tracks for the for steel and drivetrain and some general parts, and then the other side over here is Snowboy. And all of these are protected by blue flags on schedules, so generally a train will only be using the trackage that it needs and won't be allowed in. All of the stuff that's not on the main, as you can see, is push switches. They're just little slide switches that give me frog switching and help hold the switches in place, although most of them are picos and hold themselves pretty well. So we only have electric switches on the main in a very few places where you just can't reach them. And here's some aerial photos of the NUMMI plant. You can see the racks back here, single-ended auto rack facility, so fairly close to what we were able to model. It's 1999. This was a joint venture between GM and Toyota. It is now the Tesla plant. People say, well, where are the Teslas? And I say, it's 1999. We're making Tacoma pickups as fast as we can. And we were, in fact. We were running 2 shifts by 6 days a week. Here's a picture of NUMMI. This is the drivetrain parts. You can also see the steel track. And very pleased with this building. It was built by a friend of mine at Loazo, who's an S scaler. So, and he also believes that S is the ideal scale, as I think the speaker 2 back said. Down at the other end of NUMMI, we have the racks, we have auto parts. It's a GM facility, so we have the 8-door boxes, and the doors are arranged for them. There was talk at various times of putting a container lift here, but it never happened. So in reality, containers came into the Port of Oakland and were trucked 30 miles down Highway 880. And you can see we have a piggy packer here dealing with some of those. Here's the East Side track plan. You just saw this. Wanted to show you the racks. They were train cat etching, just absolutely beautiful, beautiful models, incredibly fiddly. I could never get them to stay together with CA. And even with a resistance soldering set, I had a hard time doing it without making a mess. Happily, I have a N-scaler friend who's wonderful with fiddly little things like that, and Steve assembled these, so I'm greatly in his debt, and they look lovely. Okay, so after all this, we finally come around to Niles, and we're going to get to work as the 54. The first thing we've got is a Lehigh Cement reload. The actual prototype's a little further north in the real world. But here's an aerial photo of it, and you can see the loader, you can see the silo. I was fortunate to get a tour of the facility led by the manager at the time, and he let me photograph the blueprints, so we pretty much know everything about it. Earl Gerbavon, who's done just some spectacular structures, both for me and you've seen him at the National. He won a couple of awards in St. Louis this year. So this was very nicely done. And as you can see, we have cement coming down from gray rocks in Northern California and being transloaded to trucks here. These are 3D printed models from a guy called Baz Trains on Shapeways. They're very, very nice. And there's also a nice one that Promotex has been carrying lately, which is a 3-bay, somewhat larger single bottom type affair. Little closer work, you can see the beautiful anchor fences and gates and equipment sheds, and we've got a little trackmobile. I think BLI brought these in, a Fairmont trackmobile, and we actually use it as part of the scheme. One of the other trains, the Mission Bay crew can't really do their work when they first show up because there's too many people in Milpitas. So the crew then goes off and works the various critters at the various industries. And by the time they're done with that, everybody else is cleared out and they can do their work. So that worked out nicely from an operational perspective. There's also a team track in Niles. And I've been able to, because I have a fairly limited pool, maybe less than a dozen cars that will ever show up at this particular team track. So I have trucks and forklifts and so forth that are appropriate to the various loads. And it kind of helps the crews because when they spot, I'm bringing a reefer in, where does it go? Oh, there's a refrigerated truck waiting for it, or, a gon full of whatever, a lumber flat. You get the idea. Just one more cue to help people understand what they're doing. And you can see in this area, there's hand-painted backdrops. So here's Niles. You can see we have 2 tracks of unloading for the cement plant, the team track, and on the other side, there's a brickyard. Now, this is worked as a turn, so we won't actually get to Pacific Brick Company, Pabrico, until the way back. Let's see here. And then at this point, we're going to continue up the hill to Niles. And you can see there's a tunnel there. There was the west portal of Tunnel 1 on the WP. And by the way, in the time between when UP acquired the Western Pacific and before they acquired the Southern Pacific, this was the longest tunnel, about a mile, on the Union Pacific system. And you can see the brickyard over here. This was in 99, and it, what was that, the saying at the time, it looked like the senior Iraqi leadership had been meeting here. But, we do have kilns and we do have stacks, and here's a model of what it looks like. Let's see here. I've got the participant window up and I can't see, but I think the chimney's on the right. You can also see at that second kiln, there's a little red glow because we've got a couple of Arduinos in there running a program to flash and look like a kiln that's lit. And we hollowed out another one to show that the firing cycle was done and we were now unloading. And you can see we've got pallets and forklifts hauling bricks up to the loader. Anyway, we're not going to worry about it till we come back. So here we are disappearing up the mountain. We carry a caboose. They did a little bit of shoving, but the real reason is I just thought that CA11 cabooses were cool. And you can sort of get them to be logical on a 99 layout. So here's Farwell on the Niles Canyon side. You can see my, it was getting a little dark, and this is handheld from a light plane, so it's a little blurry. But David Parks took those photos, and we went out and took some photos from ground level, later found some plans, and we compressed this a little bit. We cut out that little pony truss section because there wasn't any room, but we think it's a fairly credible model of the Farwell Bridge, and it is skewed, which is, I think, the main visual element. And this is just a kit bash of the Central Valley pin-connected truss. And looks right, feels right. From there, we go through the tunnel and come out at Hurst. And it's called Hurst because the siding is near a place called Castlewood, which was William Randolph Hearst, the publisher. You probably know him from as Rosebud, from the Orson Welles film, whose name escapes me. But anyway, it's Hearst siding because Hearst was there. You can see the siding and Highway 680 here. So this is, to Bay Area viewers, quite familiar. You would see this while heading south on 680. And there's a little interchange between the UP and the Niles Canyon Railway, which we did model, even though it's slightly out of era. And you can see On the left photo, we've got the 54 local waiting for the Ace commuter train, and there's a tie box he's going to pick up. These are 3D printed. They're a little warped, but they're very nice because we have a little tie replacement scene over here. And there's also a vintage Western Pacific covered hopper that we're going to send from Niles Canyon up to the WP Museum in Portola. And then down below we have Highway 84, and you can see we have a truck who's very frustrated by the competitive cyclists working out down there. From here we move into Pleasanton. Pleasanton has a SP depot that's been restored. It's now actually a sushi joint and a escrow mortgage place. We model a lumber yard, team track, and a winery that was there. So the winery has now become Mondo Condo, but it actually persisted till about 1985. And here's Pleasanton in the grand scheme of the world. And this was our initial pass at the depot. And again, David Parks did a super job on it, but it turned out scale size was just a little too large. So we're in the middle of reconstructing using a somewhat shortened version. And we're doing a little bit of animation and some other cool stuff. And I'll talk about laser bashing in a moment. And here's the Pleasanton track plan, and you can see we have a modern commuter station here. And the Villa Armando winery you can just see over here. And this is the scene where we're rebuilding the depot. And here's an aerial photo I got from the Local Historical Association of Villa Armando. It actually turns out to look quite a bit like the Walters Co-op warehouse that we did the first of the Villa Armando buildings from. There had been some local stories that it was actually mafia owned, although it turns out it was just a family feud. And I checked with a good modeling friend of mine who was on the police force in the neighboring town, and he said no, it wasn't organized crime. They would have known. It's too bad, but we still send them a cement hopper once in a while in case they need any overshoes. So here's the Kit Bashed Walters building. Over here, this is what I referred to as a laser bash building. So what I did is used a vector drawing program, a free one called Inkscape, and drew the windows in, and then we had it laser cut. These are Tichy windows and I think it was a plaster cast wall. And I used that painting with chalk technique that some of the craftsman guys use, and it spectacularly worked great. I am the last craftsman structure guy in the world, and I couldn't be more pleased with how well it came out. And you can see the trusses, so we fixed a couple of them so we could get the lighting in, and then the roof structure will be attached to the rest. And it comes out looking very nice, has good rafter tails without, needing to be a real craftsman person doing, a million of them on a duplicator to make it work. Okay, we get to the end of the line, and again, I'm sorry about the camera shake. This was probably taken at a 500th. And you can see there was a Y here. Here's the WP, and the former SP is torn up, but you can see where it was, and the SP crossed here, and there was a tower. What's important is that this area was a gravel plant, and we do model it, and the gravel plant was served off of this, which used to be the Walnut Creek branch, which was long gone in 99, but they kept about a half a mile of it to use as a lead. So that was switched on the SP side, but there was a sand pit that was served actually with nothing fancier than front end loaders, and WP used it for locomotive sand. So we've given that to the trackage rights train. So we assume that Santa Fe needs locomotive sand in Stockton. So we're way out here at Radom, and you can see there's a Y. And here's a nice aerial photo of Kaiser Sand and Gravel. They have a critter. It was actually a Plymouth CR8. Happily, it's the same general dimensions as a GE 44 tonner. So for now, there's a 44 tonner as a stand-in, but ultimately I'll try to do a 3D printed CR8 body. And here's the real deal, the 54 working Rhodes Jameson, which was actually the next gravel plant down in, just a few months before the Kaiser facility came out in 98 or 9. And here's what we modeled. And basically the same power set, GP40 and X Rio Grande. They haven't been painted over yet. It's only 99. And a UP Jeep 38. In fact, it looks like it's an X Mopac GP38, so very UP. This structure was another Earl Gerbavon job, and I think it came in third at the 2011 NMRA convention in Sacramento. Here's an aerial photo, and again, you can see the tracks down here. And here we are working the plant, lifting the loaded hoppers. And now we've turned on the Y, we've backed into Radom, and we're going to head down to Hearst. And here's an aerial photo of Hearst. Here's the bridge. In the prototype, here's the bridge at ground level, and here's the same scene on the layout. Truck still trying to get by the bicyclists. One of my friends, associates, regulars, Pat Latorres, used to be a competitive cyclist, and he told me the story and brought me the first cyclist. So we had to have this scene to recognize Pat and his efforts. Here's that WP hopper still waiting to be picked up, and here comes the 54. And we've now cut off the train. We're lifting the tie box, and you see a little bit of a traffic jam developing here. And now we come into Niles Canyon to Hearst, and we're down at Pabrico. You can see the stack, and we're lifting a boxcar probably full of drain tile. And so that's basically 54. He's going to run back into the yard, show you the rest of the layout. If you were to continue around the Y, there's a drop down here. So we have about a 10-car train over here and or 4 10-car trains here. It's 4 tracks, and between 4 or 5 and 10 cars. So we put the short ones over here, and it's right over the workbench. This doubles as a programming track with some switches, and it's right above the Global Research and Development campus of Model Railroad Control Systems, if it's not too busy doing car maintenance. Here's the staging area with the drop down in place. And you can see an auto rack train, and this one is the BNSF trackage rights local, and this is one of the manifests. Again, it's an operating layout, so I try to focus on what you need to be successful as an operator. What you've got here is that track schematic that I've been showing you. Then every work area, there is one. So you have some idea of where you are in the world, and if you're picking up cars and need to move them where they might be going. There's strips of Velcro to hold up throttles, clipboards. There's also a detailed track map like I've been showing, a little block to hold a couple of uncoupling picks, drink holders. And, even with the scenery, I'm quite happy people bringing drinks into the layout room, just try to keep them below the level of the layout. I don't want, particularly gooey stuff getting spilled on the layout. But, if we have a little spill on the floor, it's not the end of the world. And over here's the Smurfit Stone paper box warehouse. a number of my crew and myself have worked on it over the years. I think most recently I got in there and added some lighting and did some more weathering on it. We go back and revisit these buildings from time to time as our techniques get better and new materials come out. So let's talk about the operations plan. It's getting late and we're close to the end here. They're industry jobs, right? The NUMMI job runs all sessions. It just runs back and forth between the yard. The first pull is mostly boxcars doing auto parts, drivetrain parts, body parts. The second pull will be auto racks, then it'll go over and work snowboy, rinse and repeat. Usually this is right about when we come back from lunch and we swap crews. The Mission Bay local comes in the morning. There are the guys who, as I mentioned, put their train aside and work the critters. Then they come back and do all the local industries in Milpitas. And if the clerk needs cars moved around to keep the yard in order, typically he enlists them. We have locals. We just talked about the 54, which runs in the morning half, or if it's an evening, only run half a session. Then the next half, we run the BNSF trackage rights local, which essentially is the same thing, but it runs out of staging towards Milpitas and also sets out a big block of BNSF interchange. So we mix it up so they work slightly different industries, but about half of them are worked by both. In the real world, this train comes out of Richmond, but it usually gets caught in congestion up in the Oakland area. In our world, it comes out of a place called Mormon Yard in Stockton. I've had a couple of BNSF engineers work this job, and they are unanimous that if UP would only offer BNSF that option, they would be all over it, flies on whatever. And because they waste so much time at a place called Steege waiting to get on the main. Then we have a bunch of interchange trains, and I'll run them. It may be that one of the locals has got done and is waiting to swap jobs. They may run it. So there's the Manifest Oakland to West Colton. That's the southbound train, usually runs in the morning and takes cars going mostly from NUMMI towards other Toyota facilities in Arlington, Texas, or if it's a rack train like the Oakland to Milpitas or Oakland to Spring, it'll run down and eventually end up in Spring, Texas, near Houston. The major local is the Manifest San Jose to Roseville, Roseville to San Jose. So it comes in as the RVSJ and then swaps and goes back as the SJRV. And this pretty much clears out everything going east or north from the yard. And these are all trains that actually ran on certainly a couple of times a week basis, if not daily, in 1999. We do run one ACE commuter train. That's the Altamont Commuter Express. Runs from Manteca in the Central Valley to San Jose and returns. And then there may be some overhead traffic, which is just an opportunity to run some interesting open loads. Let's see, do we have, okay, no chats we need to answer. Here's a typical call board. The Mission Bay local is ready to go early, comes in, exchanges a few cars for the 54, and then ties up for a while. First NUMMI job goes on duty. We run all these little critters. We run the 54, and this all happens within the first half hour, so nobody's waiting around for a long time to run. And as I say, then we have these interchange jobs. By the afternoon, we have the BNSF local, and we probably have kept this Mission Bay around doing cleanup. So what I find is that I've got a dispatcher, a clerk, and 3 two-person crews running pretty much all day. And that works well. And let's get back on focus. dispatching and car forwarding. So my office we clean out and it becomes the clerk's office and the dispatcher's office. We dispatch using CATS, which simulates Digicon. Actually, SP used this at the time. Whole other story about why we didn't try to emulate CAD UP's program, but suffice it to say, a guy who was one of UP's senior dispatcher trainers talked us out of it. It's a bad idea. You don't want to do that. We said, why not? He invited us up to Roseville one night and let us run Uncle Pete's Railroad, and we understood why you didn't want modelers doing that. But it was a heck of a ride. Anyway, works very, very well. Wonderful program. The hardware is CMRI. So CATS is an application that runs on top of JMRI. So there's a whole other CTC and signaling clinic for you at some point, Jim. If we don't bore people to death geeking out, but it works well. The clerk, on the other hand, in spite of having the RFID reader, is pretty manual. All we've really done is taken a bunch of car card boxes. You recognize these as the ones from Micromark. And we built a pickle rack, perpetual inventory car locator. And here's Pat using the pickle rack as a database of car locations and destinations. So all works out pretty nicely. I was a little concerned that nobody would want to do a paperwork job like this, but it never goes wanting. We talked a little bit about car forwarding earlier. So yeah, once again, computer generated cut list, but the actual work is done by the clerk. Okay, I used to be a product manager in the communications industry, so you're not going to get away without a slide or two of feeds and speeds. We use NCC wireless. I have 7 throttles. We've probably never used more than 4 at once. Layout is basically divided into the 2 peninsulas. Each has its own booster. We have the wonderful TTX PSX shields. There is a newer version, which I'm sure is even more excellent. And essentially every work area has its own breaker. So I can bring newbies in, they can fumble around, run switches, short things, and not really bother their neighbor. So that really is great for crew satisfaction. I do have a Y throttle server. I have one hard Wi-Fi throttle. It's a UT4 equivalent, very nice. And there are a couple others out there. So, that's a nice alternative. Few people like to use their phones. I'm not a huge fan of touch screens, but, if you want to use it, we certainly can accommodate you. CMRI, a mixture of classic Bruce Chubb's CMRI and my CP nodes, all works together as designed, and we do use the layout as a test bed for that. So if we have something new, we'll put a node on the layout and see how it runs in practice. I talked about the local, in other words, if a crew would do it with a hand throw, we have a manual switch. We use Tortoise and more recently the MP series of switch motors, which I sell just because I've got them and they're handy. Rail is code 83 on the main, 70 and a little bit of Pico 75 buried under drywall mud looking like pavement. Let's see, what have we learned so far? I'm a layout design guy, as you all know. So we have to talk about that. I use double slot brackets and 24-inch doors. So the benefit was it was light and easy, and early on we're making adjustments and checking to see that heights were right. It was wonderful. At that point, it really wasn't wonderful. It turned out to be kind of inflexible. The brackets are angles. They needed a lot of shimming. Hollow core doors only have hard points around the edges and where the mortise goes. So they're kind of a nuisance for installing motors and things. I would probably use 2x2 uprights stuck to the wall and plywood brackets screwed to them and make lightweight plywood frames instead of using the doors. I wouldn't do that again. It's okay if you're you know, an apartment or a college dorm and you know you're going to move in a year, but for a 20-year layout, they really had problems with stability and just more trouble than they're worth in the long run. I used, you know, blue, pink, green, whatever color is, you know, prevalent in your area for scenery. Work well for scenic contours, and I love it. Little bit messy. We used a hot knife that was wonderful, but boy, the place stunk. For road bed, I ended up using plywood cookie cutter. If I had a little more running room, I'd use spline. Lighting, 5000K, started out with fluorescence. They've largely been replaced with LED replacements. They work great. They work even greater and use even less power now. You know, the great thing today, of course, is there's so many new, you know, LED fixtures that are sort of built with the assumption that the LEDs will last as long as the fixtures, so they're much flatter and simpler, and all kinds of alternatives we didn't have in 1998. I used Westcott tables, you know, essentially L-girder bent tables to hold the benchwork because of the flexibility and general wonderfulness of L-girder. But I found that the 2x2 and 2x3 was a little too light, not because it wasn't structurally strong, but because there wasn't enough flange to screw into. So I would probably, if I were to do it again, go with 1x3 and 1x4 girders, just to have a little more flexibility. And I'd be a little more careful about figuring out my anchor points to the walls for the tables, because until you get everything together, they're a little wobbly and you want to hold them in place. But you know, they weren't bad. I used aluminum backdrops, work great, you know, 50 foot per roll. There's exactly one seam. People tell me it's going to do this and do that, and I ask them, well, go find me the seam. And even after 12 years, you have to really go look, you know. So if it takes you 5 minutes and, you know, you think it's going to be problems, I'd have to say you had to go looking for it. It doesn't count. The one thing I would say is it does not absorb paint at all. So use the thinnest nap roller you can find to paint it, unless, you know, you can ventilate the place well enough to spray. But, you know, that's a relatively minor problem and it worked out fine. Fascia, put it up as soon as you can. It makes that whole structure a lot stiffer. In general, the fascia is 1/4 inch masonite, but there's like an 1.5 inch lip of 1/8 inch because we needed a smooth surface to put the Velcro that holds the skirts up. Anyway, fascia is wonderful, you know, good place for documentation, holding your tools, throttles, all that great stuff. Suggestion I'd make is to modulate the scene detail a little bit. The places you want to switch and you want to focus attention on should be more detailed, and try and have a little less detail and maybe a little less illumination in between them. So that's basically the story. You know, if we got a few minutes, I'm happy to take questions. Otherwise, thanks so much for listening.
Anybody have any questions for Seth?
Yeah, Seth, this is Greg. When you talked about the aluminum backdrop, you mean rolled aluminum? Where did you get it?
Flashing, right? You know, aluminum siding. It's not very popular in California, which meant that, you know, I didn't have choice of colors, but I've actually seen it in sky blue and aluminum siding country. So, you know, use what you can get locally, but it worked very well, and you know, it's held up great. We had some concern it would interfere with the radios. We did a bunch of experiments, and the answer is there's really no effect in particular. Now, I was careful to mount the receivers up on top of the peninsulas, and of course, normally you're facing the backdrop when you're working. But that worked well. The only thing that had any negative effect was we tried grounding the whole thing once just to see. And yeah, it provides some shielding then, but, you know, generally there's no need to ground the thing.
Okay, thanks.
This is Jim Murphy, Seth. I've been following your articles on Arduino and all the other activities that you've been doing for years. And yes, I've gotten some of your boards and started to install them. But on another topic, though, you mentioned car cards versus switch lists. Now, how do those integrate on the layout?
Well, so what I didn't want was people playing 52 pickup, because my experience is that they tend to end
Agree.
up on the floor.
Yep.
So then the question was, well, switch lists look like a great idea, but when I started staging, I'd end up with carpal tunnel, and there was just way too much writing. So using the RFID gives us lists of trains in standing order, because you just drag the train over the reader and it prints it out. And then all you really need to worry about is where it's coming from. Well, if it's leaving staging, it's leaving, whatever town that staging is supposed to represent. And then really all you have to worry about is where it's going to. Now, my friend Steve Davis in Coweta, Oklahoma, actually integrated that with JMRI Ops, so that JMRI Ops fills in the destinations. And it's very nice. You get these wonderful switch lists on tablets when you get to his yards. And then you just, look to see where the next car's going, set the switches, and he's got a little uncoupler and, whoop, runs down the hump. So you could automate it more. The real reason I didn't was that Pat and Larry and Earl didn't like it, and they were my clerks. So I kind of needed these guys to have an op session. It was about keeping the crew happy.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for Seth? Well, Seth, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with us tonight. And if you don't mind coming back, I would like to do phase 2 with you.
I'd be happy to. And Jim, it's always a pleasure to meet with your group.
Thank you so much, Seth. You have a great time.
You too. Have a good night, guys.
Well, guys, except for the caboose, which will run shortly, that's our show tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. Most importantly, I hope you learned something. And I hope that you'll come back to see us again. Please subscribe to our website, newtracksmodeling.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, New Tracks Modeling. And don't forget to watch those darn videos that make us a few dollars here and there. We sure would appreciate that. And if you can afford it, please don't forget that we have a Pendion page now that you can donate a little money to us to keep this thing going. Either way, we sure would appreciate it. I also got an email from one of the crew, and to say this, I got to keep the crew happy. There's a word that we can't use anymore. It's going around. It caused the pandemic. I think everybody can figure out what that word might be. The reason we can't use that word anymore is because somehow we get docked in the algorithm because we're using a bad medical term. So please don't use that word anymore. And we're supposedly using now, from what I've been told, the phrase showstopper instead of the pandemic disease that you all know that starts with the letter C. So we can't use that word because we get penalized by YouTube for some reason. And we're supposed to use showstopper instead of it. So if you can remember that, please don't ever mention that word again. I tell you the truth. This is driving me crazy. Anyway, let us run now, Phil, if you can, our caboose for the evening.
So for everyone, this is a quick video. We're going to watch half of it tonight. We'll watch another half in a few weeks. This is the NMRA exhibit at the California State Railroad Museum. And this really is just focused on the dioramas that are in the exhibit. So We'll go ahead and just watch it, and talk. I'll tell you what they are as you see them. So this is the ON30 Smuggler's Cove layout or diorama that was built, I think, by 3 Australian modelers, and it's been in a number of shows around the country through the years. So for those of you who've been to shows, this was the SN3 diorama that PBL used to bring to a lot of shows. That was kind of their centerpiece for showing off SN3 as a modeling scale. And that's where we're going to stop tonight, and we'll tease you that we can see the rest of that, including the San Juan Central, in 2 weeks. Back to you, Jim.
And all of this is part of the NMRA display in the California Museum, right?
Yes, it's all. That's kind of the entry area where you walk in. On one side, you see those dioramas, and the ones we'll see in a couple of weeks. So it's a pretty cool display.
It's impressive, no question about it. Beautiful modeling. Well, folks, that's it for this evening. Again, we hope you enjoyed the show. Most important, we hope you learned something. We'll see you here next week. Don't forget tomorrow night, if you have the time at 7 p.m. Eastern, come see Colonel Freeman. I mean, this model that he has created of the Battle of the Alamo is huge. It's gigantic, and it is detailed to the nth degree. You will not believe it. Out of the 2,000 figures that are on here, my guess is probably 90% of them he personally made and sculpted. This is something that if you've ever seen it in person, you'll probably never forget it. And millions of people have seen it in the museum where it's located. This is the room that it's in. You can look at the windows to try to get a scale. There looks to be enough space for probably single file of people to go around, walk around the model. And that model that you see there, that is the total model. It comes in 4 pieces, 4 modules that had to be trucked 1,600 miles in order to be set up in the museum in Texas. This is something to behold. It is just absolutely outstanding. That is the Colonel sitting on the model in one corner of it to give you some idea of the scale. The scale is 1/32 inch to a foot, or basically 54 millimeters, which is close to twice the size of O scale. That's the scale that he built it in. Why did he build it in that scale? That's museum scale. So if you got time tomorrow night, hope you'll join us, 7 p.m. Eastern time, only on our YouTube channel, New Tracks Modeling.